Word for strike, huelga, echoes in the pleasant valleys where most of the nation's grapes are grown.
Huelga! My fellow worker, come into the fold of unionism and help bring the agriculture worker into the fold of unionism. The agriculture worker!
Each day, strikers stand on the highway trying to persuade others to leave the fields and join them. Those who do can easily be replaced. An endless supply of cheap labor is available just across the Mexican border.
How long have you scab on your fellow workers?
The words you hear were used by the NFWA labor union, who protested for better field working conditions and better wages, among other things. They chant huelga, which means strike. Throughout the mid-20th century, migrant farm workers lived in poverty as they picked crops in the California fields to bring food to America's table. As years passed, one man, similar to others, had had enough. His name was Cesar Chávez, and he would go on to change the lives of many migrant farm workers for the better. His role in leading the NFWA would pave the way for the fight against the large California agricultural industry and bringing better working conditions and pay for America's poor migrant farm workers. On March 31st, 1927, in Yuma, Arizona, Cesar Estrada Chavez grew up of Mexican-American descent. Following the loss of their farm during the Great Depression, the family moved to California, where they became migrant workers. Chavez and his family lived in many migrant camps and picked crops for a living. Due to the harsh conditions and seasonal picking, Chavez moved around a lot, forcing him to attend 30 different schools during his childhood. Following his father obtaining an injury, Chavez dropped out of 8th grade and went to work in the fields to help put food on the table. He joined the Navy during World War II in 1946, but after 2 years, he returned to migrant farm working in Arizona and California. His years in service allowed him to see the world and get a better understanding of what it was like elsewhere. A few months after he returned, he became a grassroots organizer for the Community Service Organization in 1952. Over the next years, Cesar Chavez worked to register new voters and fight racial and economic discrimination, rising to become the CSO's national director. Chavez resigned from the CSO in 1962 after other members refused to support his efforts to form a labor union for farm workers. That year, he used his life savings and founded the National Farm Workers Association in Delano, California, otherwise known as the NFWA, which still stands today and is known as the United Farm Workers of America. This group not only fought for better pay and working conditions, but instead also focused on the condition migrant farm workers face outside of work as well. These were the nation's poorest and most powerless workers, who labored to put food on the nation's table while often going hungry themselves. This was due to the very low wages that were as little as 40 cents an hour. This caused many children to drop out of school just to help sustain the food on the table at their own home. Inspired by the nonviolent protests pioneered by Gandhi in India and many others, Chavez led a peaceful fight against California's powerful agricultural industry that fought back with all the weight of their money and political power. As Chavez worked to recruit and build the NFWA labor union, his wife Helen worked in the fields as the family struggled to keep food on the table. In September of 1965, the NFWA set in course to strike against California's grape growers. Chavez is most known for this as he led many marches to draw attention to his cause, like the one in 1966, where he led protesters on a 340-mile march from Delano to Sacramento, California. The NFWA and the AWOC merged in 1966 to form the United Farm Workers Organization Committee, which later in 1971 became the United Farm Workers of America. The strike lasted 5 years and included the boycott of California grapes and many different protests and strikes throughout California. The grape strike and boycott ended in 1970, with the farm workers reaching a deal with the major grape growers that increased the workers' pay and gave them the right to unionize. Throughout the 1970s, Chavez continued leading the union's efforts to gain better conditions for workers and continued using his nonviolent techniques of strikes, boycotts, and even hunger strikes to push for change. Cesar Chávez and the UFW continued fighting for better rights for farm workers, like in 1972 when he protested against an Arizona law banning farm workers from organizing and protesting. Thanks to the UFW's efforts, California passed the landmark Agricultural Labor Relations Act in 1975, giving all farm workers the right to unionize and to negotiate for better wages and working conditions. Cesar Chávez also opposed other things like the Vietnam War in the 1970s and was an early supporter for gay rights. He died April 23, 1993 at the age of 66. A year following his death, President Bill Clinton awarded him the posthumous Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian award. Today, 8 states recognize his birthday as a holiday, and many cities around the country have named streets, buildings, and schools after him. Although Cesar Chávez was not a great influence in everyday American lives, this poor rural Mexican-American helped fight and better the lives of the poor migrant workers that carried the country's backbone in the shadows.